welcome to Disability Sector The Truth, presented by BFG Podcast. I am your host, Blake Forbes, along with my friend from the Paul the Other One YouTube channel, Paul Barlow. Over the next few months, we will be looking at how the New Zealand government's restrictions have affected vulnerable people in the disabled community. And we will hear how it's truly affected them in real time as opposed to what's portrayed on the media. So join us over the next few months as we really tell you the truth about what's going on in the disability sector. Tonight, I'm joined by Nick Ruane, Dr Rebekah Graham, and Peter Reynolds. It's so good to have you on to talk about disability tonight, everybody. So, for those of you who haven't watched us before, how about we all go around and introduce ourselves very, very quickly.
Well, I'll kick off. Thanks, Blake. I'm Nick Ruane. I'm involved in quite a few things. I have kind of my many hats. But and been involved in disability service provision, disability rights, our DPO movement. And I think you're right. There is a lot going on at the moment, so it's a good time to be talking. We've got a superstar panel here tonight, led by yourself, Blake. So it's really great to be here tonight. So looking forward to the discussion.
Kia ora koutou. I have shifted my office into the living area for reasons involving children coming back home after leaving home. Now, because it's 8 o'clock at night, my teenagers have magically decided it is time to potter about in the kitchen, which is very inconvenient. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, I am here representing Parents of Vision Impaired, and we've just come off our annual parent conference over the weekend, which was fantastic to connect with other parents and just have a really good time supporting each other. So lovely to be back into the fray.
Peter?
Thanks, Rebecca and Nick, and thank you for the welcome, Paul and Blake. Peter Reynolds is my name. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the New Zealand Disability Support Network. Been in that role for 3 years. All up, spent about 20 odd years involved in health and disability support services across various institutions, starting off with DHBs, and I think they were even cheese in my day when I started, and involved with NESCs and all the other acronyms we can possibly think of. But it's they say the three certainties in life are death, taxes, and change, and boy, have we seen change over the last 12 months, and are still likely to see it over the next 12 months.
So Peter, I'll start with you, since you're the newest member to our panel. What have you disliked the most about what Minister Upton has done over the past, let's say 9 months or so?
Disliked?
Yes.
I guess I'll answer your question the wrong way to start with. I don't have a lot of opposition with what the minister is trying to achieve. I have some big issues with how it's being achieved, and I think that's where the problem lies for me.
And how do you oppose?
Within our means, we realise that government has limited budgets, but they've got plenty of money to give landlords, discounts and taxes and what have you. But one of the lowest percentages of GDP investment in disability support just doesn't quite make sense. The sort of changes that they're making, things like freezes on residential care funding, freezes on packages of support over 105k, and some of the draconian rules that were introduced in March, they're silly. And we need to be a little bit more principle based, and we need to be a wee bit more focused on the documents that we've got in place that we live by, enabling good lives and the UN Convention and others, and do the right thing by people. And right at the moment, I feel that that's not happening. While I represent an organisation that's focused on providers, at the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve the same thing for those people we serve. And that's doing the best we can for disabled people who require our support. And when you get policies and decisions from not just politicians, but from officials as well, that get in the way of that, then there's something dramatically.
Mm-hmm. Rebekah, would you like to reiterate anything?
I think, look, it's just been a hell of a year. And as a parent, it has just destabilised. Like the minister talks about wanting to stabilise disability supports, and nobody's saying that's a bad idea. But what has happened this year has destabilised us as families and as parents. And it's been incredibly difficult having all these changes suddenly out of thin air imposed on us. And so not only did we have all our disability support suddenly upended on 18th of March, the changes subsequently have been really ad hoc, inconsistent, and it's left. I mean, I'm quite a competent, articulate, bloody-minded sort of person, and I'm quite capable of advocating the shit out of things. And I am just some days sitting there going, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm allowed to spend the money on. I don't know how to provide the supports my daughter needs. I don't know if we're allowed to do this. What about this? What about that? And that's hard. That uncertainty is incredibly destabilizing. And it means that, like, thinking beyond just me, for our parents coming off the back of our conference, there isn't the same investment into parent capacity building and to developing parents to think beyond just what they need right now. And I know, because of the work I do, and Peter will know this too, that parents need to have a vision for their disabled child beyond just meeting their basic needs. They need to have a vision for a life that exists beyond that. And if you don't have that vision, you're never working towards it. So you end up accepting mediocre, half-assed, half-price services, service provision, ideas. When someone tells you, oh, we can't do this, you just shrug your shoulders and go, oh, okay. Instead of going, no, that doesn't work. No, that's not what I want for my child. No, absolutely not. And digging your heels in and making things change. So that worries me. It worries me a lot. Yeah. That was a rant. Clearly that had been building for a while.
Nick, would you like to add anything before I move on to the next question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the images that's going to stick in my mind for a little while was when I was at the NZRDA conference. One of the other things I do is a national board member for New Zealand Writing for Disabled, and we had our national conference earlier this year, and I went around and spoke to our members, many of whom are parents as well, and they place their young kids into Writing for Disabled, and I just am stuck with the memory of parents and members coming up and talking about the uncertainty of not knowing whether they'll be able to book their young people into writing lessons the next week, because they just didn't know, and for many of them, they were booking their young people 6 and 12 months in advance, and that's just how it was happening. So there was just a huge level of uncertainty and not knowing who to contact, and not knowing what was happening, because it's just a significant part of their life. The structure and the routine about going to writing once a week, once a month, sometimes even 5 days a week for some parents with their young people. And yeah, I just got away from that really struck the actual impact that these places had.
And Nick gone again. Hey,
And it's gone. And what's that? Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, and the other aspect was the lack of involvement of disabled people in all of this process. And because, I mean, Whaikaha is our ministry. I mean, we fought for 20 years to get this ministry established. And then all of a sudden, it's been basically, nobbled. And so that for me was really astonishing. And also the lack of involvement in the process. The review was really galling for many disabled people. So those are some of the reflections that I had.
Rebekah, I'm going to come to you. So what were the main things you noticed talking to people at your conference last week?
Oh, we had a great time, and it was just so nice to talk to other parents and to debrief and to laugh and cry and have some drinks and do all of that kind of peer support stuff. And I really noticed coming home, I thought, gosh, very few parents get that. Like, we get that because of the support of the blind sector and the intentionality of the blind sector in developing parent capacity and a bunch of stuff. But most parents don't get that. They don't get to be part of a community. They don't get to have peers they can do this stuff with. And that ends up eroding parent resilience. It ends up eroding the capacity of families. And unless there's an intentionality there to invest into families, you end up with nothing. And that has stuck with me quite a lot, that, we fell into this community 10 years ago, and yeah, we don't get together a lot, but you only need a little bit to keep you going. But for people who don't even have that little bit, it's harder to keep going, and it's harder to keep advocating, and it's harder to keep pushing back, and it's harder to keep insisting on a good life, and it's harder to keep insisting. Like, for us, school this year has been incredibly difficult. And for some of our families, that's an ongoing issue. And it's that peer support and capacity building that keeps you pushing in and keeps your feet under the table and keeps you going to these meetings and keeps you saying to the many paid professionals who are at the table in your meeting, going, no, that's not acceptable. No, that's not okay. And when I reflect on that, I think, gosh, it just becomes easier as time goes on to shrug your shoulders and go, oh, okay, I don't have the energy to fight anymore. I'll just accept this mediocre outcome for my child. And that's kind of what I've been thinking on this week.
Yeah, the next question's for all of you, but Peter, I'll start with you. How does it make you feel when, months on, the minister continued to deny that there has been freezes when there clearly has?
Look, there's a few political shenanigans going on. She does use the word freeze, so I'm intrigued to think that she doesn't feel there's a freeze in place. She doesn't like using the word cut. She claims that there hasn't been cuts to services. Well, there have. If it looks like a cut, smells like a cut, tastes like a cut, it's a cut. Hello. One of the things I did recently was to contact this new DSS unit crowd in the Ministry of Social Development and ask them the question: if we put aside the anguish just for a second and say, well, okay, all of these things that are going on, all of these decisions are designed to save the government money, how much has been saved since these changes have been made? You've got the first 3 of 7 recommendations that have been implemented. So what does the savings look like? And I got the response to an Official Information Act just the other day: we don't know. Now, I don't know if there's a a swear jar on this program, but that's absolute bullshit. You
They say
don't
you're on the
institute
internet, you can
stuff
say
like
whatever you
that.
like.
You don't institute things like this without that being the top line report you would put through to your minister to let them know if the strategy is working or not. And they're telling me they don't know that. That's not good enough. If I was advising Minister Upston just at the moment, I'd be saying, look, you actually need a new set of officials, quite frankly, because clearly they're not.
Rebekah?
You probably saw my facials. I have a terrible poker face, so, I don't play poker. You probably saw me just going, what? How can you not know? Like, what?
Do you have anything to add in terms of the minister continual lying, Rebekah?
I think the minister is very competent. I think she has consistently been across a number of issues, and it doesn't make sense to me that she doesn't know.
Okay. Nick?
I'd have to agree with Peter that this minister is very competent, knows what she's doing, very politically astute. Excuse me. Yeah. Excuse me. My apologies. Yeah. Sorry. That's about it.
Are you all right, Nick?
I'm fine. I just got a bit of a tickle. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll move on. What's your guys, if you have all seen it, what's your guys' reaction been to the letter that David Seymour put out recently regarding rare disorders and the STAR program? Oh boy.
This is a minister who has perhaps correctly identified an opportunity to do something about the breadth of unnecessary bureaucracy that we all have to live with and put up with, whose first response to that is to set up a new ministry with a new bunch of bureaucrats and a new set of rules and a bunch of special forms that have to be completed. Again, did he not look in the dictionary to see what the definition of irony was? But this is just a classic example of it. And I had great faith in what Seymour was doing because he was highlighting an area that I've been involved in myself in the early childhood space. But then the response just didn't seem to make sense. So I think his letter tends to fall into that category. From an education perspective, I think he gets a very much could do better in his report.
The thing that worries me, and I'll come to you, Nick and Rebekah, in a second, is that he's trying to penalise. He goes around the bush without saying it. He basically is gonna penalise people for not going to school, that can't go to school, that have rare disorders. It's disgusting, in my opinion. Can I get a brief comment from Rebekah, and then I'll go to next.
We're all worried about Nick's coughing now. I was horrified. I mean, it just showed such. I'm not sure whether it's deliberate ignorance or just uninformed ignorance, but there was a huge level of ignorance there around the reality of what disabled children, parents of disabled children, education in schools looks like. It just completely negated any of, firstly, the medical realities of you take the medical appointments you've got, and by goodness, you make them. And it doesn't matter if you've got 3 different appointments on 3 different days. Boy, you get to the hospital and you meet those specialists and you do what you can to get your child the healthcare they need. And what Seymour seemed to be saying was, you will be penalised for that, because even though those absences are justified, you will still have an investigation opened into you into those absences. And then the school has to do a bunch of paperwork to show that they've investigated. Like, it's a whole bunch of very unnecessary work for the school and unnecessary pressure on the parent, and it doesn't change any of the outcomes. And the other thing that I'm aware of is that for a lot of parents of neurodiverse children, there are not the same accommodations in place to enable neurodivergent children to attend the school full-time. There does not seem to be any implementation of the kinds of supports and training and funding and all of those things that would actually enable full-time attendance for neurodivergent children. So it seemed very unnecessarily punitive without actually doing anything to improve the outcomes and without providing any of the supports that teachers and teaching staff and school communities and boards of trustees and parents have been saying we need.
Yes. And Nick.
All right, I'm back, back from the dead. Okay, I'm wearing my ECE Voice T-shirt today because there is a lot of concern around what's happening with our early childhood sector, our primary sector, in terms of what's going on with a lot of the reforms, the planned reforms. But we do have serious problems with what's happening in terms of guaranteeing access for our disabled rangatahi and young disabled kids in terms of getting into school. Just the right to education is not guaranteed in Aotearoa, New Zealand. There's a lawsuit at the moment that's been taken by IHC to test that. So this type of thing further provides a further barrier in front of guaranteeing access and guaranteeing the right to education. But I'd make a further comment that usually this type of thing would be managed by the school. You know, if a young person had a medical appointment, that type of thing would be managed by the school. So if we've got now the minister sending a letter over the top of the school saying you must do this or you must do that, that's actually pretty heavy-handed, really, when most schools would have managed that situation practically and with a lot of sensibility around what was actually happening on the ground, and just, you know, understood what was happening, and done so, you know, and just saw it for what it was rather than making a big deal out of it. So yeah, I just see this as a huge overreach for no real purpose, when schools are handling this situation every day.
Yeah.
And have done for years.
Yeah. My final question to to all of you would be, what would you say to encourage and I want a short statement from all of you. How would you encourage the minister to appear on this program? Who wants to go first?
Tell her it'll save her money, and tell her that she needs to think about nothing about us without us.
And to you, Rebekah?
I think the minister has talked a lot about how she is consulting with the sector. And it isn't always clear who she's consulted with or who she's talked to. And I think that coming on this program and being able to talk openly and honestly with yourself, Blake, on this podcast would actually give some reassurance within the disability sector that she isn't just talking to a hand-picked few.
And to you, Nick?
Yeah, I think any time that you don't go out and either correct the record or make a statement things get said and potentially mistruths get told, or things get blown out of proportion. So I think my suggestion to the minister is come on, have the conversation, and either correct the record or make the statement around what's going on. Have the conversation with Blake. He's not as scary as he might appear, and and just have the discussion, because it will set the record straight. It will enable the government position to get out there to a very wide audience, and it may actually just dial down some of the rhetoric on it.
Well, yeah. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's been a pleasure to sit down with you and have a wee chat.
It's been a pleasure to spend that time having a chat with you too, Blake. I'm just not sure about Paul. Strikes me as being dodgy.
I totally am. Absolutely. These things behind me, I stole them all. Every single one.
Anyway, thanks for joining us, guys, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Thank you for
Thanks,
having
everyone.
us so much.
Great to catch up.
Bye-bye.